All right, so it's distance learning, and we're going to fast forward a little bit. So let's talk about Washington's entire presidency in really one slide. What do you say? Issues during Washington's presidency. So there was definitely some big stuff that happened during George Washington's presidency. Two major events were the Whiskey Rebellion and the French Revolution. Let's start with the Whiskey Rebellion. All right. So one of the biggest issues that really plagued the country early on was the fact that we had no formal taxes. Like there was no formal taxes that were set up. And basically, Alexander Hamilton encouraged Congress to begin taxing various things. So putting a federal tax on various items to try to generate money for the country so that the country can begin to use tax money on social welfare programs like, building roads, building up our army and our infrastructure. There was all kinds of stuff that needed to happen. But in order for those things to happen, we need to get money. And where are we going to get the money? The people, through taxes. However, as you're probably fully aware, the colonists before they were Americans, are they people that like being taxed very much? No, they don't like taxes. Didn't like it when the British asked them, aren't probably going to like it when the United States of America asked them. But here we go. Southern whiskey makers were very angry over taxes, claiming that they couldn't make money and transport their whiskey to stores, I know. It's like, hey, you want me to drive the whiskey somewhere and make it and pay taxes to the government? They're pretty upset. There was a national outrage over taxes on whiskey, forcing Congress to lower whiskey taxes in 1793. This solved the majority of the problems. Backing the taxes down, most people chilled out, but it didn't solve the problem for the Whiskey Boys. I love the name Whiskey Boys because it sounds like a 1950s like a band of like five dudes like singing songs. I don't know, whatever. So the Whiskey Boys of Pennsylvania, they started tarring and feathering tax collectors. Where have I heard that before? Who came to collect tax money. Both Washington and Hamilton saw this as a threat to the government's authority. So, we can't let a couple of people in one state start popping off and kind of, slapping the federal government in the face. So the federal government has to put the pants on and, show them what's up. Let them know this is not allowed. So basically, Washington sends 13,000 soldiers led by him himself. So this is kind of crazy. This is the first time ever and the last time ever in American history that the president himself came down from well, there was no White House yet, but either way, came out of his presidential home and said, all right, boys, and led soldiers into battle himself. Really weird. So Washington personally takes 13,000 troops to Pennsylvania to back down the rebels. And they saw him and went oh. And the Whiskey Boys surrendered without a single shot fired. They were actually really honored that George Washington himself would handle this personally. And there was something about Washington himself coming that really I don't know, it made them inspired to be American. And they kind of let it go and they decided to pay taxes. Now this seems like a big win, right? George Washington, again, and all of the amazing things that he does, manages to shut down a small rebellion, but in Pennsylvania without firing a single shot. However, Thomas Jefferson, the Secretary of State, was quite angry over this. He saw the decision basically as a hostile force against Americans. This showed that the federal government would be willing to use armed force to violate citizens' rights if necessary. So Jefferson saw this as a big no-no. The federal government would use force on its own people, kind of like the British did to the colonists. So Jefferson was super upset about this. Now let's talk about the French Revolution. In 1789, France began a revolution to overthrow their king. And boy, oh boy, was it a bloody revolution. Their dream was to create a government based around liberty, equality, and brotherhood, similar to America. However, they went about theirs in an incredibly violent fashion where kind of the lower class of France rose up in big numbers and executed many of the upper class for the mistreatment and the abuse that they called it over the years. And they weren't totally wrong. There was a lot of problems in France, but the violent way they went about solving it shocked most Americans. Within 3 years, France had created a brand new government and waged war against all kings in Europe. They had a leader at the helm named Napoleon. So basically, when the French people turned on their king, Napoleon, a general in the French army, was like, oh, dang, this about to get bad. And he could see that, like, the lower class, this massive group of oppressed citizens, were going to win this fight. It was not going to be the king because everyone was betraying the king left and right. So Napoleon smartly takes the whole army and rallies behind the kind of the rebels who are fighting to overthrow the king, and says, like, I'll join you. And soon he impresses them enough for them to make for these people to make Napoleon their leader. So they went from having a kind of a king to this, I don't know, this other dictator-like figure. They kind of just replaced one king with another king, if you asked me. But, they were very, very happy. And Napoleon immediately waged war on all of Europe, saying that his goal was to overthrow every single monarchy and, turn them to dust or whatever. Jefferson and his followers heavily supported the French, calling them patriots and heroes. You must remember that it was Jefferson who gained the support of France in our revolution. And he felt that because of what they did for us, it was our turn to now help them. However, news travels slow back in the day. They don't have TMZ. They don't have all these things that we have that let us know what's going on in the now. It soon arrived that the French had maybe chopped off some people's heads in the process of this revolution. How many? 1, 2, 3, 20,000. I mean, who's really counting here? But it was 20,000. Some of them were also women and children. Oof, that is bad. In their crusade for freedom, they killed women and children. Yeah, this French Revolution is sounding a little sketchy to me. Hamilton condemned both the French and Thomas Jefferson for supporting such a brutal act. Now, Jefferson would have never supported them had he known that's what was happening. He didn't know that's what was going on. In his mind, he probably envisioned it was a revolution similar to ours. But no, this one was quite bloody and quite revengeful. There was a lot of anger and hatred from the lower class towards the upper class for what they perceived was, abuse and neglect over the years. And, Jefferson was really embarrassed about this. I mean, it was an embarrassing thing for Jefferson to have supported people like that. And many people were fearful that Jefferson and his supporters might be willing to behead Americans to follow the footsteps of the French. Now, that's silly talk, but still, unfortunately for Jefferson, this was a big hit towards his popularity. The French Revolution drew a serious divide between Hamilton and Jefferson, and also the people who supported Hamilton and Jefferson. And this leads me to discussion question number 3. What do you notice as a major issue between the relationship between Jefferson and Hamilton during Washington's presidency? To George Washington, Jefferson and Hamilton were the smartest two people in the entire country, and he believed them both to be the future of America once he retired. But we have a massive problem. Tell me what's wrong with these two's relationship. Let's hear about it. See you in the next video.